Hey everyone, it is Patrick Lovell. It is Thursday, March 2nd at approximately 10:45 a.m. my time. And it's been a while since I've dropped a truth bomb. Some of you know me from my truth bombs. Some of you may know me from my efforts on TikTok. And some of you may know me for my efforts being a producer of the television series The Con. For those of you who don't know me, I am a muckraker journalist. I'm also an independent producer, and I've become obsessed with the unfortunate realities of corruption. And corruption isn't a vagary. Corruption is a detailed understanding of the mechanics of how power operates today, yesterday, and in the conceivable future until you, me, we come together to put an end to this. I was thinking about how I wanted to approach this truth bomb, considering it's been at least 3 weeks since my last truth bomb. In my last truth bomb, I was just kind of like throwing up my arms, like, you know what, this isn't going anywhere. People aren't responding. There's no chance that we're going to move the ball forward in the manner concurrent to the actual problem. And so I just kind of hung it up and moved on to things that I do. So I'm in the midst of producing some incredibly important material with some high level people and cross pollinating a lot of information to those that I know. And hopefully we're going to break through this madness with a long form revelation concurrent to what I've already done in my series. And if you're not familiar with that, you can find it at www.thecon.tv. But also, on YouTube, on our YouTube page, which we call Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs The Con, in addition to the hundreds of hours of truth bombs that I've done over the course of the last year, there's one in particular that's extremely important. If you click on the live pull down menu and you find Deception Owns You, you'll find a 10-hour filibuster that I presented to the American people about 3 months ago with a coordinated effort of allies that descended upon the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C., to create the correlation of real people that know the jig is up because they've got the information that we've been revealing for the past several years now, actually at the source of the wellspring of power that reflects that we, the people, aren't foam on the runway for the crashing financial system, as former Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner famously quipped approximately 13 years ago. So, I find myself in this situation where everybody, it's like Groundhog Day. It's like everybody that's in whatever camp, whatever tribe, whatever sort of vertical, whatever sort of reactionary scenario to a lot of things that come at us fast and furious because of technology, tend to ask the same general core question. Everyone for like at least the last 13 years, if not longer, have asked or proclaimed that the system is rigged, and everybody seems to be aware of it, and that the system is corrupt. But yet the system keeps on keeping on because you, me, we, everyone has not come together under one umbrella, under one banner, under one marching technique to be able to say, look, we know the details of who did what, when, and how. That reveals what I just mentioned to you, that the Federal Reserve is the wellspring of what fuels this massive, massive corruption. Now, let's be clear. I'm not an anti-Federal Reserve person. I'm not saying the Federal Reserve is corrupt to the point of they're responsible for the machine. They just were utilized and maneuvered as a result of a massive contagion, a massive emergency, to where decisions had to be made to save the global economy. But what that ultimately means is it just saved those at the upper crust aspect of the global economy, and everybody else was expendable. So for the past 13 years, no matter where you live, I'm sure you're aware that the economy has been in disarray for some time. I think most of us kind of put our rewind to the COVID era and kind of think in terms of, well, what we're in the midst of is sort of an extension of what took place during that time period. And so that's our orientation. But yet, as we've seen in the body politic and the sort of the consensus of what happens in this ridiculous media machine that we've created and interact with, is that there's, of course, the MAGA universe and all things sort of Trump related that might, lead to their sort of battle cry that the corruption is out to target them, which is absurd if you know who Donald Trump is. But, as we move forward, the mainstream media is going to start to kind of concoct this whole narration of what we're building towards, the 2024 presidential election. And we still haven't closed the door on all of the facts of the insurrection. The fact that Donald Trump is still walking around is like, are you fucking kidding me? And breathing free air is my point, where the man should have been arrested long ago, possibly decades ago, long before this current incarnation that followed the insurrection. But the way the January 6th committee actually did its investigation is it hangs its hat on Trump as the mastermind. Anybody who's ever paid attention to Trump knows he's not a mastermind. There was a lot more involved with the insurrection than Donald Trump. And because those questions aren't answered, it just shows another aspect of what I'm referring to as corruption. But this January 6th and all of the things that led to it and the absurdity of the big lie and the way that it's playing out right now, because mainstream media is like, oh my God, look at this Dominion lawsuit. And Fox lied. Oh my God, can you believe Rupert Murdoch lied? Who the fuck would ask that question? My God, the guy's been lying for decades. But the state of journalism in this country is such that what we have to wait for a lawsuit by a large corporation to create discovery of what was going on at the largest conservative network as it related to the insurrection where the big lie was promulgated? Are you kidding me? I mean, I was like, and I am, for those of you who follow me on Twitter, and I have been for some time, very critical of most what we call mainstream media, but it's not really mainstream media. It's echo chamber cable, online, personalities that, basically act as if it's high school. And they've almost got the same resources that someone in high school would have with no expertise. I was looking at the background. Like sometimes I watch this woman on MSNBC by the name of Alex Wagner. She's very cute and perky and she's quite intelligent, but she knows nothing about most of the subjects that she's actually engaging or embroiled in or wanting some sort of, full-on answer. But she doesn't know the details of the last 20, 30 years, particularly as it relates to corruption. Most specifically as it relates to the Department of Justice, let alone what's been going on at Fox for the course of, let's go back to when frickin' Murdoch actually started it as a response to Ted Turner and CNN. I mean, they needed a conservative voice, and that all, basically evolved from what was going on during the Nixon impeachment and ultimately, that time period where the new right, as it's called, had a sort of come to Jesus moment where it was like, business has to circle the wagons and protect itself. So we're going to create a communication device to do that, which was basically the seeds of what would lead to Fox, in the 90s. And Rupert Murdoch has been nothing but a fountainhead of lies the entire time. And so here we are in 2023, where through a lawsuit, because of the voting machines, because of the big lie, have to rely on a corporation to sue to get discovery on what is effectively the corruption of media. And I didn't finish my point about Alex Wagner. Yeah, she's cute, she's perky, she's this, she's that. Where did she come from? Well, she was an actual game show host on Netflix, a show called The Mole, which is interesting because I didn't think about this. I'm pretty sure, now this is weird, Anderson Cooper was also a game show host, which on a show, I'm pretty sure back in the 2000s, and I haven't researched this, I'm pretty sure was also called The Mole. How interesting would that be that Alex Wagner and Anderson Cooper came from the same background? Boy, what an incredible resume you have to become someone in prime time, to be able to, act as if you're a what? A purveyor of news and you're a journalist with a lot of expertise and knowledge. No, you're a game show host contestant. And if you're the case of Anderson Cooper, you're like the scion of the Vanderbilt, family. Who are the Vanderbilts? My God. But then you look at Tucker Carlson talking about scions. Tucker Carlson is nothing but, I'd say, where'd they find that guy? Well, I'd say the trash. But of course, he's like a scion of the Tyson chicken, family, which is this, I guess, monstrosity when it comes to big agriculture. Anyway, so these types of personalities find their way to mainstream media, if that's what it is, in the echo chamber circus, and they ask rhetorical, stupid questions of which they have absolutely no knowledge of, because they're not journalists. Which brings me back to where I was at the very beginning. I'm an investigative journalist. I'm an indie producer. I put together a series called The Con, once again at www.thecon.tv, which shows you the details of all of the manifestations of what in the court of law would be discovery of how the largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up in history happened. It leads up to 2008. For many years, I've been trying to get, the second season because I've got hundreds of more hours of information and detail of more and more and more corruption that actually is coming to a head tomorrow in a case, and many of you might recognize the name Bruce Jacobs, who's defending himself against Bank of America, trying to basically suborn and throw out his RICO suit against Bank of America that he had to do in Hawaii because the state of Florida is so completely captured that the Supreme Court of the state of Florida and the bar of the state of Florida is basically, closing down, the walls are closing in on Bruce Jacobs' legal career out of Florida, and however that pans out, by him revealing, and he has for the last 12, 13 years, he's a former prosecutor turned foreclosure defense attorney, because he's seen massive fraud and cover-up and deception with this criminal apparatus, which is RICO, through the financial system and the banks that are basically setting millions of people up to steal their homes illegally. That the government not only allowed, but provided trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars of upside to the villains that pulled this off and no prosecutions. Which is what? Corruption. The financial system has overrun the United States government's ability to thwart corruption. You've all heard of revolving door. Everybody knows the system is rigged. Everybody knows the system is corrupt. But I'm the guy that has all the details of who did what, when, and how, that spans several presidencies, many different congressional time periods, to provide you this information that when the world blew up in 2008, and it blew up, and I'll put it into perspective this way, for those of you who have heard me say this a million times, I'm sorry if this... You've heard this before, but it bears repeating for someone just hearing this for the first time. Sam Bankman-Fried and the FTX debacle led to a $9 billion hole in the balance sheet that's gotten a lot of national attention for a lot of reasons. But in comparison, in 2006 to 2008, the derivatives on this mammoth Ponzi scheme freaking fraud with tens of millions of felonies that blew up the world and brought it to a complete standstill was to the tune of 600 to 800 trillion. And now derivatives, by the way, on all sorts of manner of commoditization and securitization and bets on bets, which are derivatives, is somewhere north of $1.2 quadrillion. So what happened is the world blew up in 2008. The Federal Reserve came to the rescue behind the scenes when media wasn't paying attention, because it's made up of the aforementioned who couldn't freaking find, their face in front of the mirror. That's how freaking foolish and stupid they are. Ultimately, but that's what they get paid to do. And ultimately, I had to go on this massive journey to go put all of these pieces together. And I did it. And I'm screaming from the top of the mountains over and over and over with all of the details. And because this world is so incredibly loud, because this world, and I'm a victim of it myself. Like, for example, I got on TikTok this morning, and it's no different than every other morning I get on TikTok. And because the algos are generating things that I'm interested in, action sports and football, and extreme sports and all manner of rock and roll and cool things that I'm interested in. It's like my favorite magazine, but in this video sort of thing that really astounds me. but I can get caught watching it for like 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden I'm like, put the phone down. You can't look at, you're wasting too much time. And I've got all of this information. And so why am I telling you all of this? Why do you want to listen to a guy like me who presumably has all these answers that you don't know anything about, even though I probably put literally thousands of hours for public appetite and all of these different social media platforms that maybe several million people, I know we've gotten like 7+ million views on TikTok, but they haven't translated to 7 million people going, holy fuck, are you kidding me? Which is what we need. And so what I'm here to do is I'm here to tell you that I have announced my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. Now, is that ridiculous? Yeah, because I have no qualifications to be the president of the United States. Quite frankly, in this day and age, if you're in the system and that means you're corrupt, I'm going to say that's not quite the right resume, as much as maybe, somebody like Alex Wagner shouldn't probably be a network commentator bringing us the news every day when she has no idea what the fuck's going on. I mean, so we got to be very careful about what boxes we check off in terms of criteria. But ultimately, what I am suggesting to you is that the system is fucking corrupt, beyond comprehension corrupt. And there's a way that it works. And I have those answers. And I have the biggest answers of all time. If your issue is systemic predation or racism that leads to, an insanely unfair sort of scenario where African Americans wind up in prison for small infractions, particularly marijuana related, and go to jail and they can't get out and all those sorts of things, that's tied to what it is. And I'm telling you, if you've got a problem with the environment and you want to try to recontextualize, the paradigm of the United States where we have renewable energy and, we move on to the next century, which we could have done last century if it wasn't for corruption and every other thing that's going on. I mean, whether it's disparity of wealth, whether it's, injustice, whether it's all of these different things. Look, the United States was an experiment, okay? It was an experiment that was born by revolting against tyranny. Tyranny had been the thing of humanity for thousands of years. Do you have any idea how long slavery has existed for? Slavery has existed for at least 11,000 years that we know of. And it makes it kind of interesting in 2023, given everything that the United States has had to, grow and endure and, evolve and fight and sacrifice for, really since the beginning. But I'll just kind of put the latest version from, post-Civil War forward, where we had the progressive movements and we had all of these different, in order to form a more perfect sort of scenario that goes for over 120 years, winds up, with the Great Society and civil rights, and of course all of the horrible tragedies that befell that in the process. Whether it was the assassination of John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King, and then of course the Vietnam War and all of that era, which is when I was brought into the world, and then ultimately, what's happened since. And the bottom line is, in order to form a more perfect union, has to come from the equilibrium of separation of powers, which our founding fathers, for better or for worse, and of course they had faults like everyone does because no one's fucking perfect, is they put together a comprehensive answer to tyranny to help people self-govern. But the thing about government is that for that to work, you have to actually become a citizen. You have to be informed. You have to be engaged. You have to have actual ethics. You have to know right and from wrong. And then you also have to understand what's in your best interest to be able to vote for someone that enables them to basically represent you in a representative democracy, or as a lot of the fucking Confederates want to constantly refer to as the Republic, which they would prefer the instead of leadership by the majority, obviously controlled by the minority, which is that little trick based on all sorts of other things that many of you know about through voting rights and gerrymandering and all of the other manners of really incredibly diabolical, gamesmanship that big money can do. The questions you've got to ask yourself is, do you want to live in a confederacy? Do you want to live in a robber baron state? Do you want to live in a state where corruption makes sure that you have to go work in a place to provide for your family, at minimum wage, where you can never get ahead and you're always going to be in debt and you're always digging? That's the world you live in, okay? Is there a lot of beautiful sorts of elements in terms of like free market economy and capitalism and things that can actually create opportunity? You bet your ass there is. But the problem is, in this day and age, after the 2008 great financial crisis, what happened is that system failed because of insane sociopaths that created what we show you in the con, which was a liar's economy, which was a fictional economy that was backstopped, however, with the full faith and credit of the United States through a myth that we can actually create as much liquidity as we need to guarantee this system. There's so much more. I could talk for tens of hours, thousands of hours. I already have. But what I'm trying to get to is that I am running for president, not because I believe I can be president or I should be president, but because I want to create a campaign of anti-corruption. Now, Bernie Sanders kind of did this back in 2016. As a matter of fact, when Bernie Sanders said, and that famously to me, and I think about this day pretty much every day, he actually had the question and the opportunity at the plate with the bases loaded to the full count, and he could have sent this freaking ball to the moon when he stated that Wall Street's business model is fraud. But the follow-up to that was there was no follow-up. Not from him, not from the anchor or mediator that was actually, asking the questions, moderator. Ultimately, it all fell on deaf ears because there's a causality, just like a machine, just like any system. We all know that when we drive through our downtown streets or wherever, we need the stoplights to work. We all know that if we go to the airport and we expect to get on an airplane to go visit our loved ones wherever the hell we're going or some dream vacation, we expect to get there. All of those systems have to work. Same with the system of our government. And the government is working exactly the way it's designed to for those who have all the control, which is you have always said the system's corrupt. It's rigged. Okay, fuck. Don't you get that that's not okay? That we have to fight to be able to overcome the corruption with the facts, with the narrative? And that's what I've been doing to the grand jury of the American people for some time, but I still haven't been able to break through and have a watershed moment to where we're all on the same page. Because everybody's on a private island. If you go on Twitter, everybody's got something that they can be critical about or they can espouse from their own place of suffering, and it might feel good. And maybe you get a couple of likes here and there, and I can, I can attest to that myself. But the bottom line is, it doesn't create a movement. We got to have a leader, and nobody's doing it because nobody has the answers, and everybody's a liar. I'm not. So what I'm asking you to do is to donate $13 to this campaign to purge corruption. And it's for me to become the president so that hopefully I can elevate this in a central way so that we can get, as much of attention as is concurrent to the problem of corruption. It's the sole problem of everything. It will destroy us. It has been destroying us. It will continue to destroy us, a vast majority of us, until we have so much suffering that it's like, you got to be kidding me. These systems are fixable. They're manageable. But you got to understand the problem before you can have a solution. And that's what I can deliver. And so what I'm asking you is we'll have a GoFundMe campaign. We'll have down in the comment section the way you can donate $13. It doesn't matter who you are. If you work, at a grocery store, and you're going to spend $13 at the coffee shop or when you go to whatever. I mean, I'm asking everybody for $13 so we can. In fact, our goal should be right out of the gate. Let's say 1,300. 1,300 contributors of $13, which would give us $16,900 to get organized. And then we continue this plight moving forward. If you want to donate more than that, go ahead. But the reason I'm asking for $13 is 13 was a big thing in my evolution and how all of this came together. It's kind of some strange connectivity. But when I started studying 13, I mean, look, the American original colonies, there were 13. 13 means revolution. 13 means the articles of faith in Judaism by Maimonides. In a lot of cultures, 13 is kind of like the balance of the universe. There's 13 moons this year in 2023. 13 is the number of revolution. Now, interestingly enough, this is how it all played out in history. A lot of people associate 13 with bad mojo, right? With bad luck. Why? Because in 1407, on Friday the 13th, it was the Pope and the King of France, and the Pope was in France at that time, who basically conspired to create a sabotage that betrayed the returning Crusaders because they felt that they were a threat to their monopoly power, quite frankly. Sound familiar? And it's interesting that that time period then went underground, became the Knights Templar. Well, it was the Knights Templars originally. Then it became the Masons, which were all of the building guilds throughout Western Europe, and then evolved to the United States through the Freemasons, which of course were our founding fathers. Now, the Catholic Church calls them the Illuminati. And I'm sure there's some strange bit of financiers and Illuminati and all sorts of bullshit, myth and all of that other kind of crap. But it's the notion of reestablishing the separation of powers, the revolutionary zeal that matters above all else. I've seen out there, like, for example, Bernie Sanders is out there peddling his new book, which is It's Okay to Be Angry with Capitalism. Meanwhile, he's still talking in platitudes, just like he did after he said Wall Street's business model is fraud, and he didn't come up with any details of who did what, when, and how. Let me tell you what I have. I worked with the FBI, the DOJ, the SEC, AGs around the country. I proved the largest RICO conspiracy in the history of the world. What is RICO? Racketeering, influence, corrupt organization, the fucking mob. That's what our system is, okay? Many of you have heard about BlackRock. What is BlackRock? BlackRock became the king of the world because of what it is I'm telling you. They were the ones who became the administrators because of Timothy Geithner basically choosing BlackRock to be the administrator of what we call Maiden Lane, which was the first part of these bailouts that led to $30 trillion in 2009 to the bankrupt financial system that happened illegally, and we've spent another $30 trillion since to the system. If you want to put that into comparison of how things work, we've got, I think $6 trillion budget last year, 2022, for the government, the federal government. The GDP of the United States, which is all collection of goods and services, and everything we produce throughout a year, was like 22 trillion. We spent north of 50 to 70 trillion for a tiny cabal of financiers, which is our financial system, that pulled off the ultimate coup d'etat, not in the January 6th insurrection, but in 2009. The January 6th insurrection is just a response to that. That's basically from the white supremacists who are like, look, if we're going to have a corrupt system, we're going to get ours, and let's return to the Confederacy. I'm not about that. I'm not about the new robber barons. I'm about liberty and justice for all, based on the integrity of the system and based on the dynamism of, quite frankly, a fair marketplace. But the only way that can work is if the system has integrity, if justice actually matters, and it doesn't right now. It doesn't. How many times do you have to see something like Rupert Murdoch is untouchable? Or how about Jared Kushner or Steve Mnuchin? And of course, Donald Trump. My God, those of you who are just suffering at the idea of Donald Trump being free, I'm with you. It's ridiculous. The guy is like low-hanging fruit. But he's not the ultimate villain in this mess. He's a villain. He's a joker. He'd be like one of those guys who say, hey, don't hate the player, hate the game. That's Donald fucking Trump, right? The guy's so guilty of so much shit. And if our Department of Justice can't take him down, it's because they don't want to, because it's going to reveal so much more about the whole system as a whole. And maybe Donald Trump does have information. I'm not quite sure about that. Look, I've talked for much longer than I wanted to. The baseline here, people, is that if we could get 1,300 people to donate $13, we're at $16,900. We'll get organized. We'll be transparent about everything that we do and we spend money on. But I know media because I'm a producer, and I know how to get the message out. And I'm actually working at the highest levels that I'm about to do this and blow up this stuff in a lot of ways. But I got to build a groundswell. You got to have a ground game, just like General Patton and the Third Army, and going through Italy, and then after D-Day and everything else. It's like you got to be able to handle what is in front of you, and the only way we can do that is if we have budget. And the only way you're going to have a representative government for yourself is if you pay for it. That's the way the man freaking designed this. Why do you think we have dark money? Why did you think we had, what was the Citizens United decision, right? They're like, okay, you want representative democracy, you got to pay for it. I'm asking you for $13. Everybody can afford $13 as opposed to the billionaires who give hundreds of millions of dollars to these pimps, hoes, and fucking junkies that are in control. And, quite frankly, I would love to do things. Let's just dream for a second. What's the math if we've got 13,000? So 1,300 would be, if we did 13,000, I think we're up to, at $13, that's 169,000. What happens if we get 13 million? I guess we're up to 169 million. I mean, that would be somewhere in the vein of what Bernie Sanders was able to produce. And we've got to have this happen before the 2024 election. And, like, for example, could you imagine taking a small segment of that and producing a television show? Like, you remember the show Who's Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, right? Can you imagine posing, let's do fifth grade civics questions to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Santos, or you name your favorite politician, quite frankly, but those guys in particular. My God, look, between media and our government right now, it is a train wreck disaster, worse than what happened in East Palestine and Ohio. It's a failed state. If you're up over your, if you're done with what's going on in East Palestine because of, the greed of the board of directors of Norfolk Southern, and that Americans are expendable, and many of those guys in East Palestine are like, hey, they're Trump supporters, and it was Trump who got rid of the regulation that Obama tried to do on the brakes that led to it, and they can't see the forest for the trees, just like the Obama supporters don't realize that it was Obama that let his former AG, who worked for Covington and Burling, who created MERS that buried tens of millions of people illegally, was the AG that didn't do any, criminal prosecutions, even though he left the door open, because everything I'm telling you is written by the government and all of the settlements in the Federal Crisis Inquiry Commission, as well as the National Mortgage Settlement. It's the government admits everything that I'm telling you, except none of you understand what the details are because the media is full of shit. And the media is owned by the same rat bastards that own Congress. Don't you want somebody representing you, or do you want to have a revolution? Okay. You want to have a revolution? You want to go to the streets? You want to go pull these guys out? You want to have a French Revolution in the Reign of Terror? Go ahead. Good luck. This is the strongest military in the history of the world. You won't stand a good chance unless you got 300 million people willing to fucking become cannon fodder. And I don't think most people can get past their TikTok device. I sure as hell can. I want the law to work. I want people of integrity in the system that are professionals that do what they're paid to do and not revolve out of one job where they don't think they're making enough money, so they go work for the corrupt villains to bury the American dream. I really, really wanted to keep this short. I'm sorry. It's a complicated subject. There's a lot to it. I love the United States. I love revolutionary zeal. I love patriotism. I love the integrity of the law. I love it when systems work, and I love it when good people win. That's who I am. Do you have a family? Do you care about those in your family? Do you have children? Do you want your children to thrive? Or do you want your children to be basically martyred to slavery? I mean, fuck. It's 2023. Do we want to let all of those incredible sacrifices from the glorious patriots and progressives that fought and they earned and they won in order to form a more perfect union? It's never perfect because we're people. Humans are far from perfect. I learned a long time ago that there's two columns of our soul. On the left-hand side or right-hand side, doesn't matter which way you're looking at it. You have character and integrity versus complicity, duplicity, and hypocrisy. I really, really hope that there is eternal judgment. It'd be kind of cliche, wouldn't it? Given everything that we're talking about, because the evil exists in all of us to either be complicit in this game of Machiavellian deception that basically turns everything upside down for the benefit of a few, or if you want a system that works, where common sense works, where people are smart, where citizens actually know what's in their best interest, and they can understand the truth when it hits them square in the face. And not unlike Marjorie Taylor Greene, who looks to me like she stepped on a shovel. I want to do that with the truth. I want to do that. I want the truth to hit you in the face like whatever bullshit comes out of Marjorie Taylor Greene's mouth looks like it hit her with a shovel. Was that rude? Yeah, I guess. Whatever. And I'll just point it out. Look, man, in the last 20, 30 years, my friends, we've seen a lot of people utilize other generations' sacrifice to betray it. What's the story of Weinstein, right? Harvey Weinstein. Now he's in jail for the rest of his life. Went down just recently for like another 16 years, I think, for rape cases in California, even though he was in jail, of course, in New York for others. So they finally got Harvey Weinstein. But Harvey Weinstein was in the business of systemic rape for decades, and everybody knew it. Most notably, his human resource director, who, just happened to be a woman. You can't play by this system's rules and think that that is a victory for identity. If you're black and you work in the machine, I knew there were CEOs, at Merrill Lynch who were doing just the same sort of insane shit that all the other CEOs were doing, and one happened to be an African American. Thank God they weren't all Jewish. There are a lot of Jews in finance, but they're not all Jews, so you can't blame it on the Jews. It's just the system of corruption that is destroying us. Please, step up. Everybody needs to step up. Share this with 13 people. We need 13 volunteers. We need 1,300 people to donate $13. $13 is what you would spend for a freaking meal at Wendy's these days because of inflation. I know, because I did it just recently. It's insane, the cost of shit. If we're going to fix the society, if we want the USS, we're at a crossroads. We're either going to continue to go the USS Titanic, or we can become the USS Enterprise. And there's nothing this country can't do. How is it possible that we're the nation that pulled off everything that we've done, including the likes of D-Day, and of course NASA, and we wind up with Trump and Santos and Marjorie Taylor Greene? And yeah, it's easy to talk about those guys because of the whole Murdoch circus and that insanity on the right. But does that make the left, if we call them the left, does that make them better? No, man. They're all accepting the game of corruption. They talk out of both sides in the mouth, and I swear to God, everybody who's been in power for the last 30 years is full of shit. I remember back in the 60s, didn't they say don't trust anybody over 50? Unfortunately, I'm over 50, and I'm asking you to trust me. The bottom line is this system has to end. If you go 9/11 through 2008, through COVID and everything else, it's just been a series of just like, this shit's not working, my friends. It's not working. And it's not working because of integrity, most importantly, and media is dead. You can't trust media. You can't touch the politicians that are involved with this media and this duplicity that lies to you, where the mechanics behind the machinery behind the fucking curtain is what it is I've revealed to you. It's Federal Reserve Act, and there we go back to 13, by the way. How about that for coincidence? Federal Reserve Act 13.3 was used illegally to pump trillions upon trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars to the goddamn diabolical thieves and criminal apparatus that destroyed the world. I'm not expendable. Chances are you're not either. Join me on a crusade to purge corruption. Donate $13 today. Thank you. Onwards and upwards.